What is up, you guys? Welcome to the second episode of the Ball Don't Lie podcast, where we talk all things NBA basketball. I'm Suhas, and with me I have Hudson, Tejas, and Darian. Today we're going to be talking about our part two of what to look for each NBA team. If you guys missed episode one, pause this and go check it out. Because today we're going to be talking about the Western Conference. Make sure you guys watch both. Show love to both. If you guys disagree with anything we say, or if we talk about your team and we didn't mention something, leave it down in the comments below. We want to make this as interactive as possible. Without further ado, let's get into it. So the first team in the Western Conference that we're going to cover is the Dallas Mavericks, as we're going alphabetically. So the Dallas Mavericks came off, in my opinion, quite a successful season. I know they but in the playoffs, they really showed us what they're capable of. Taking the Los Angeles Clippers to 6 games without Kristaps Porzingis for majority of the series, in my opinion, was a pretty big accomplishment. And in my opinion, I believe that they had a pretty good chance of winning that series with Kristaps healthy. Um, and they have a nice young superstar in Luka Doncic. But the big question for me, I already mentioned this, is how much is Kristaps Porzingis going to be injured? Can he stay healthy? Because if he can stay healthy, they're always going to be in the mix for his championship contender. But if he's going to be injured like he has been, he is a pretty injury prone player. Um, then it's going to be tough for them. They have a couple expiring contracts in Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Courtney Lee, and JJ Barea, and then they have a player option in Tim Hardaway Jr., which he'll probably accept for $18 million. But I think this team could be scary in the future, especially if they add someone like Giannis in the 2021 class.
Yeah, I mean, this team is obviously a young I wouldn't say young, but um definitely great team. As like you said, we saw against the Clippers taking it to 6. We all remember that Luka game winner in overtime, and I think that this team has lots of talent. Obviously, with Luka Doncic, Kristaps Porzingis, Tim Hardaway has a player option this offseason. Um, but like you said, it depends if Porzingis can stay healthy. If he could, that's a huge win for the Mavericks. There's been tons of rumors about Giannis going to the Mavericks. So if he does go there, that would easily be the next super team in the NBA. And I think Luka Doncic, as he's shown the past 2 seasons, could easily be one of the greats.
Yeah, for sure. Luca's well, now as we're seeing now, more European players are starting to take over this league, and Luca is an example. I mean, during the playoffs, especially against that tough Clippers defense, I mean, he was insane. But in the future, as Suha said, it's going to depend on Kristaps Porzingis' health, if he's healthy or not. And also, I would like to see them get maybe save their cap for this season and go big in the 2021 free agency class, because you got to remember, Luka is still on his rookie deal. And this is huge because they can sign someone next offseason, and that way they can build their super team and then compete. So, I mean, there's boatload. This is a bright future for this Mavs team, and I'm looking forward to see how it all works out.
Well, the Mavericks, like Suha said, I think had a very successful season. I think if Kristaps Porzingis was healthy, they would have at least lost in 7. I think they could have won the series because it looked promising for the Mavericks. In the West, the 3 and the 7 seed were only 4 games apart. It was a very close. The standings were very close in the West between like around 2 and 7. So the Dallas Mavericks had the potential and like the talent to be to be the 3 seed through the 7 seed. So them being the 7 seed isn't like a normal 7 seed. They exceeded expectations. I think Dallas needs to definitely hope that Tim Hardaway takes the player option, because that's only 1 extra year. 2021, there's a lot of great free agents, and I think Dallas could be a spot that Giannis wants to go, or let's say a couple role players or a couple above average players so they can build on what they already have. I think Luka will win MVP next year. And if Kristaps can stay healthy, he's another all-star. So the future is bright in Dallas, and I think they have a couple championships in the next 3 or so years.
Yeah. But moving on here, next up is the Denver Nuggets, and this team is going to be taking a hit in free agency this offseason with guys like Paul Millsap, Mason Plumlee, Jeremy Grant, Torrey Craig, all being free agents. Jeremy Grant has a player option, and I've been seeing rumors like the Heat have interest, but with that we don't know anything. But we saw what they did in the playoffs last year as the 3 seed. They were down 3-1 against the Jazz. Jamal Murray clutched up and brought them back. They were down 3-1 against the Clippers. He clutched up again, brought them back. The Lakers are a different breed, but you get the point. The Nuggets are a great team. Jamal Murray is an incredible player who I expect to be an elite player in the next 3 or so years. And Jokic is just that big man that can shoot, almost like Anthony Davis, except I would say less athletic. So I think that this Nuggets team might take a hit in free agency this offseason, but if they can try to sign somebody in 2021, that'll be a big turnaround for them.
I personally think this Nuggets team clearly overachieved. I mean, obviously, most people didn't pick them to get out of the second round. Obviously, Clippers, but this team is resilient, and they have a bunch of resilient pieces. Obviously, Jamal Murray, and I think Jokic is probably the best passing big man we've seen in a long time. I mean, the way he passes the ball is absolutely extraordinary, and I would say for the future, they need another player besides Jamal Murray and Jokic that can create their own shot. And I think a possible trade for maybe, I don't know, Bradley Beal or maybe even Drew Holiday is in the making. And if that happens, they're probably one of the top 4 contenders in the West. But again, they could also go in a different direction, let their young players develop like Michael Porter Jr. And hopefully, I think Jeremy Grant will come back to this team. There's been rumors about that too. But, I mean, this team's future is definitely bright, and it just depends on which way this franchise wants to go.
I think the Denver Nuggets are one of those teams that I think they're the only team in the NBA that has the talent that can win a championship now or next year, and also have a very bright future. I don't think there's many teams that can do that. Like the Warriors, the Lakers, the Clippers, they're all now teams, but the Denver Nuggets are now and future team. So I think they have a lot of potential on what they can do if they can perform. The Nuggets have so many pieces that they can basically trade for anyone in the league that isn't superstar. Like I'm not talking like James Harden level or like Curry level without trading Jamal Murray and Jokic, obviously. But like with Monte Morris, Michael Porter Jr., I don't know if they want to trade him, but he's still an option they have. They still have Gary Harris, Jeremy Grant, Will Barton, Bol, Torrey Craig. They have a lot of good players. So if the Nuggets play their cards right in this offseason and even 2021, they could build a team because they have time too, because Jokic and Murray are still young and they're both on I'm not sure when Jokic is a free agent, but I know Jamal Murray signed a 5-year deal. I think it was last year, so he's locked up for quite a while. So they have time, and I think they can get to the second round again next year with this current team. Maybe pull another upset off, but I don't think so, depending on who they're playing. But if they can play their cards right in this free agency, this offseason, and also 2021, they could really have a good team with the foundation they already have with the free agents and the trade assets they have.
Yeah, so the Denver Nuggets, you guys all mentioned it, Jamal Murray and Jokic were kind of the backbone of that team. But one thing that I really liked about what they did was that they surrounded those 2 guys who are defensive liabilities with guys like Torrey Craig, Jeremy Grant, Paul Millsap, who are, above average defenders. I think Jeremy Grant, someone said Jeremy Grant. I think one of you guys said Jeremy Grant is going to come back. I actually disagree. His player option is only for $9 million, and I think he could get a way bigger contract. I think 15 million could be what he might target because he's a very valuable player. The Denver Nuggets are currently they have $72,000 of cap space, so they don't really have that much at all. And I think Paul Millsap will probably be taking a pay cut because he's been getting paid 30 million for the past I think 3-4 years now. So if they want to bring him back, they'll probably get him on a pay cut. And I know they want to bring Torrey Craig back because he's restricted. As far as trading for another star, I think they've already made it known that Michael Porter Jr. is untouchable. So I don't really know how they're gonna get someone like a Beal or a Drew Holiday, even though I'd love to see that happen. Um, but I want to see Jamal Murray take that, leap of consistency. Like what we saw in the bubble is cool and all. But I want him to, make it known that this is not just some bubble stretch that he just went off for. Like I want to see him, legitimately. I want to see him be an all-star next year. And it might be hard, but I think he has what it takes. Jokic is, in my opinion, the best center in the league. And yeah, the future is bright for this team. Even though they like Darian said, they're win now, but they have a lot of young pieces. Like their two main stars are young, so they're gonna be in the mix in the future.
Yeah, I mean, this team again, as you said, is bright. I think they might bring. I think bringing Jeremy Grant back is a priority though. But anyways, moving on to the next team, we have the Golden State Warriors. Well, this season really wasn't. I mean, they did get some positives out of it. Overall, it was a bad season. The Curry injury was really the bad highlight of the moment. But this team is going to be a contender in 2021. They have Curry coming back. Klay Thompson looks healthy in all those highlights that we've been seeing over the offseason. They still have Andrew Wiggins, Draymond. I mean, they still have that number 2 pick. And I'm pretty sure they're going to draft James Wiseman, but that's another story for another day. This team really doesn't have that many cap holes. Marquise Chris is actually pretty good for them. Same thing with Damian Lee, and I think they'll bring them back on pretty good salaries. They obviously don't have cap space, but if I'm this team, 2021, they could contend for the championship, but also look to the future for someone like Giannis. They could make a trade for him if he doesn't feel so happy in Milwaukee. But with Steph and Klay, anything is possible with this team.
For the Warriors, it pains me to say because I am a LeBron fan, and since 2015, the Warriors have been beating LeBron with the exception of 2016. And it pains me to say this, but the Warriors are looking scary. With Curry healthy, he's still a really, really good player. And Klay Thompson being the second option on this team now because Kevin Durant's gone, he will step up, and I think he'll be a superstar for them. And he's probably the best shooter in the league. And the only person you can really compare him to is Curry, which is his own teammate. So it's one of them two as the best shooter. I think the Warriors shouldn't draft this year. I don't think they should trade down. I think they should just trade their pick away. I don't think they need young pieces right now. If they can get a young star that isn't super young but is a proven star out with that pick and trading Andrew Wiggins for the cap for to make up for the money it takes, I think the Warriors can really, really have a good team. If Giannis in 2021 signs with the Warriors, I'm going to stop watching basketball. That is the worst thing as a fan of the NBA that can happen, especially with the Warriors again. I don't want to see a super team on the Warriors ever again. I just want good competition in the NBA, and I think the Warriors will provide that this season. And it's going to be interesting seeing what they do with their draft pick. But yeah.
Yeah. So with the Warriors, this team is going to be right back in that contender mix. I think one of you guys mentioned Luka Doncic as your, early MVP pick. I'm going with Stephen Curry. I think he has that chip on his shoulder. Dame's been making a lot of noise, and you got Kyrie coming back. You got Westbrook. You got all these guards, who have something to prove. And I think Stephen Curry wants to make it known that he's still the best point guard in the league. So that's why I have him as my MVP pick. Um, I think with the pick, there's been some reports that came out. They worked out uh, Denny Abagia from Israel, and apparently they were blown away. And then I think they just recently worked out Edwards and Wiseman, and I'm not really sure like what they felt about him, and I don't think it came out yet. But I don't think they're gonna trade the pick. They could, but I don't really know what's available for the number 2 pick. Um, it's up to them. I think that they still have a like whether they trade the pick or not, they're still gonna have a very dangerous team. And even with like lacking a center, the Warriors have um, essentially dominated the last half of this decade with like Bogut and like David Lee and like Festus Ezeli as their centers. So I don't know if like they're gonna prioritize the center position. I think they should because now you have Anthony Davis in LA. So I don't know if they match up who's gonna stop him. But I still think you're gonna see that death lineup with Draymond at the 5. And I want to see Draymond, bounce back. He's kind of been under the radar for the past couple of years. You know, uh, he was an all-star in the past, but I feel like he's been disrespected. I still think he has game. I think he's still a very impactful player. I want to see him bounce back, and this team is going to be dangerous in the future, especially with that 2021 free agency class.
Yeah, this Warriors team has lots of work to do. Like you were saying, they've the 2 pick. They made tons of moves in free agency last year. Obviously, Kevin Durant headed to Brooklyn. Klay Thompson had a 5-year extension with them, and they got guys. I'm pretty sure like Alec Burks, who have been helping them. I'm pretty sure he got traded though, no, to the Sixers. Um, but or shaking, I'm not sure, but um, obviously I think everybody knew that their season was over as soon as Steph Curry got injured. Um, I don't think obviously the Warriors' plan wasn't to tank, but when Klay Thompson was out, I think everyone knew that their season was kind of over. But with healthy Steph Curry back, healthy Klay Thompson back, um, I think that this team has a lot to prove. Like you said, I think that they might also have Draymond at the 5, but their 2 pick is going to be extremely interesting to see what they do with it. I don't know if they need a young rookie star, as they already have Steph Curry, who's getting up there in age, and Klay Thompson, but I think that they could use this pick to trade and get a valuable asset.
All right, guys. So the Warriors, a team that will look to make a little bit of a rumble in the NBA. But our next team, the Houston Rockets, had a plan that fell apart miserably, trying to go small ball in the regular season. At the trade deadline, actually, they traded their center, a young up-and-coming center, for Robert Covington and other pieces, and they decided that they wanted to play PJ Tucker at the 5 in hopes that it would work. The Rockets were tied for the 4 seed with the Thunder, who they played in the playoffs round 1, and they could have lost that series, which would have been even more disappointing. But it doesn't matter because in the next series they got humiliated by the Lakers and got gentlemen swept. The Rockets in the previous offseason made a trade for Russell Westbrook, and there was a lot of noise around the Rockets because in previous years they couldn't make it to the finals, and they thought this year was their year, but everything came crashing down. Daryl Morey is gone now, who people thought was the best president or GM. I don't remember what his role was exactly, but they thought he was one of the best, and he's gone now. Russell Westbrook and James Harden continue to play flat in the playoffs, especially when it matters most. And their team isn't looking young at all. They have a lot of old pieces, and I think they have some free agents they have some players that are going to end up being free agents. I think Daniel House is a player that could be good for them, and Eric Gordon, he showed a little bit in the playoffs that he can be a good player, but Houston could not win like this. I think they need to completely rebuild their team because the West has gotten a lot stronger, especially with the Warriors coming back, and Houston will definitely not be a team that I think is going to be contending for a championship.
Yeah, when we're talking about Houston, you mentioned it. They had their little run where they were trying to contend, but I think they missed their window, man. I think their window was when they had a lead on the Rockets. I think they were up 3-2. I know Chris Paul got injured, but in Game 7, they missed 27 straight threes. Like, I mean, that's unbelievable to me. Like, um, and I think that just says a lot about who that like what that team is. Like they don't have a backup plan to me. I think they're like when their main plan is not working, like they kind of just don't know what to do. Um, they have a lot of free agents this year. Austin Rivers, who has a player option, Tyson Chandler, Seth Losha, Demari Carroll, Jeff Green, just to name a few. Um, but I think they just got to clean house. Just kind of just start over. Build around James Harden. If that means trading Russell Westbrook, then I mean you have to because James Harden is getting into the point where I don't know how old he is, but he's not a young player anymore. I think he's like in his 30s, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he's 31 right now. So he's in his prime, and you don't want him to leave the team. You want him to keep him with you while he's in his prime, and try to build a solid team. None of this small ball having PJ Tucker play at the 5 because that clearly hasn't worked out. I still think Daryl Morey was a good GM because I think every year that he was there, the Rockets never missed the playoffs. But I think that the small ball thing was where it really like that was like the last straw for me. Like, I don't know why he thought that was a good idea, but I think they need to just start over and just build around James Harden. And if you have to trade Russell Westbrook, then you do it.
Yeah, I mean, this team to me even like looks like it's going into rebuild mode, firing their president and head coach this past season. Um and there's been tons of rumors that they could be trading Westbrook, and I think like you said, I mean, PJ Tucker at the 5 is not going to work. If you need to trade anybody, I would do it, but I don't know what this Rockets team plan is after getting rid of their president and head coach and now not having a center. I can't really tell what's next for this team, but to me, I think that you have some guys on the team like Austin Rivers, Daniel House, like you said, and Austin Rivers has a player option this season only for $2 million. But I do think that this team could be going into rebuild mode, and I think that Westbrook has a chance of not being in Houston at the start of next season.
I'm going to be honest. I would say Russell Westbrook is probably one of my favorite players, excluding Celtics players. But I was really disappointed by Russell Westbrook this season. I thought he had a chip on his shoulder going into the bubble. People were criticizing him. And I thought he was going to shut the haters out and they were going to somehow upset the Lakers. But, of course, that didn't happen because small ball doesn't work, especially when you have P.J. Tucker guarding Anthony Davis. That's just not going to work. But I want to go back to Darian's point about Daryl Morey. Daryl Morey made the trade for Robert Covington, that 14 trade, and giving away Clint Capella because Clint Capella was hurt during January, and they won a string of games with PJ Tucker running at the center. And I don't know if that, it might have done something to him. Like he definitely lost judgment, and he was thinking, oh, we need another wing player beside 3-and-D player, and that's probably why he traded Capella, and he resigned. I mean, Daryl Morey was a decent GM. Obviously, he's not one of the best, I would say, but he made the playoffs every year. This team clearly has to trade Russell Westbrook. As much as I hate to say it, they need to build around James Harden. I know he's getting old, as you said, Suhas, but they need to trade Russell Westbrook somehow, and they need to sign a center over the offseason. It doesn't matter, any decent center who worked for the Rockets. They need a center now, especially with Anthony Davis, if they want to try and contend for a championship.
Before we move on to the next team, I just want to like to be fair to Russell Westbrook, he was coming off an injury, I think, and he had the coronavirus. So I don't want to blame him too much. He did disappoint, but I think he's gonna have a bounce back season next season. But yeah, moving on to the next team, we have the Los Angeles Clippers. Probably my most disappointing team in the West, if not the whole NBA. I think we all expected them. I think we all expected that LA matchup in the conference finals, and we didn't get it. Got beat by the Nuggets. Obviously, we know what happened. Choked the 3-1 lead. They had the lead in Game 5, and it just evaporated. And then from then on, it just kind of just the domino effect. It just fell. Doc Rivers is gone. Tyronn Lue has been promoted to the head coach role. And there have been reports saying that they're trying to look to trade every player and just kind of just rebuild around Kawhi. Not rebuild, but retool around Kawhi. So if that means trading Paul George for another star, they might do it. We all know Paul George underachieved. Kawhi, I thought, played very well until the last game, until Game 7, where he just was terrible. And I think this team is they just I wasn't really a fan of this team because they just talked a lot. Like Patrick Beverly and all, they were just talking, yapping their mouths, and it just showed like they had all bark and no bite. A team like the Lakers, like LeBron and Anthony Davis, didn't really say anything. They just kind of just went with their business, and they won a championship. With the Clippers, it wasn't the same story. And I think what they have to do, I think they need to trade for a strong lead guard, a guy that can, command the tempo and bring the ball up, make plays. They don't have a playmaker on their team. They don't have someone who's going to, find the open man consistently. They got a lot of guys. Like Patrick Beverly is a defensive guy. Lou Will, Kawhi, and Paul George are guys that are scorers. They need a guy that can control the tempo, make plays, and I think that's who they should target. Montrezl Harrell is probably going to be gone, so maybe even a big man too. But yeah, this team has a lot of work to do.
So the Clippers came to the playoffs as the 2 seed, and they did have some extremely high expectations to make it at least to the Western Conference Finals. Everyone wanted that Clippers matchup. It never happened, and they got upsetted in the second round. And to me, I think that this team has lots of work to do. It's unlikely that Montrezl Harrell is going to come back. Marcus Morris Sr. is also a free agent, and there's been rumors that Kawhi wants the team to get a new point guard. I don't know if Zubac would be a reliable center to be on a championship team. So to me, I think that Zubac would have to be a backup and at least get somebody as good as, for example, Miles Turner. But mainly, I think that this team needs a guard. And if they can keep Kawhi, that's great. But they have they? I'm not sure if they've hired a new. Oh, that's right. They actually hired Tyronn Lue as their new head coach previously last week. I saw that the players wanted him as head coach, so that might have better team chemistry. And to me, I think that they should trade Paul George, but honestly, that this team to me has lots of work to do.
I'm going to be honest. At the beginning of the season, I thought that the Clippers were going to beat the Lakers in the Western Conference Final. Like, not at the bubble season, at the beginning of, actual season, October. I thought the Clippers had probably the best chance of winning the championship. But my pick changed midseason because I saw the chemistry with the Clippers just wasn't clicking. Kawhi was having load management. Paul George was, load managing. And that's probably the main reason why they messed up in the playoffs. They didn't have team chemistry. And again, Paul George is probably one of my, favorite, one of my better favorite players in the NBA, but he just underperformed again. This team has to trade Paul George, especially, and they have to get something back in return, especially for what they gave up for this man. They need to trade him. They need to get a quality point guard. I don't know who they would go. Maybe Chris. I mean, but it's kind of weird sending Paul George back to Oklahoma and then getting Chris Paul back to LA. But that's an impossible option. I really don't know another quality point guard on the market. Maybe Kemba Walker, but I don't think the Celtics are gonna trade Kemba. So this team really has to figure stuff out, especially like at the center position too, with Montrezl Harrell being a free agent.
Well, for me, I knew from the beginning of the season that Paul George was going to choke, and I knew that the Clippers were being overrated from the beginning. I did pick them to beat the Nuggets in 7. I wish I could have went back and changed that, but I had the Lakers winning, and I think 5 or 6 over the Clippers, but we never got to see that. The Clippers' problem was, which I think no one else except for Skip Bayless said this, even though he thought the Clippers were going to win. Even Skip Bayless doesn't have the best takes, but still, he said the Clippers were focusing and built their entire team for the Lakers to try to beat the Lakers. They built their entire team. They got Marcus Morris. They got all these pieces. They got all the players that can guard LeBron for the Lakers. They were overlooking all their opponents, which is why Dallas could have won the series. It went 6 games, could have gone 7 if Kristaps didn't get injured. And that's why they blew a 3-1 lead to the Nuggets after being up all 3 of the closeout games. I think one of them was 19 or 18, and then it was 16 or 15, and then 13 in the Game 7. Kawhi had 2 bad games in that Denver series, the last one being the worst one, with him and Paul George combining for 24 points on horrible shooting. I think the Clippers' chance is done, and I think unless they can get, as you guys said, a good point guard, I think Chris Paul would be a really good fit on the Clippers, except for his contract. Let's say Chris Paul was on a $20 million, then he would be a perfect player for the Clippers, but I don't think he's going to go to the Clippers because of his contract situation. I think the reason why Toronto had such success the year with Kawhi is because they had Kyle Lowry. I think Kyle Lowry would be a really good fit for the Clippers. He's just getting old, and I don't know who they would trade for him because I don't know if Paul George for Kyle Lowry is a good trade because I think Paul George is a little much for Kyle Lowry. And I think Tress is going to walk for sure. I don't think he's staying on the Clippers. And if the Clippers fail to build a good team around Kawhi in 2021, he's going to walk. And Paul George is also a free agent. They both have player options in 2021. So they can become unrestricted free agents and they could walk.
Yeah, what's funny to me about the Clippers and Lakers is that before last offseason, or I should say before LeBron came, the Clippers and Lakers were just irrelevant, and all of a sudden they're the 2 best teams in the league. But either way, moving on, we have the Los Angeles Lakers, and this team's coming off the best. This team was the best team in the league last season, winning the championship, but with the Nets having Kyrie, KD, and a new head coach back, they're gonna probably have to make some moves to repeat if they want to. You have AD as a free agent, but it's pretty obvious he's going to return back to them. But I do think that this team could easily repeat. They may have to do 1 or 2 small moves, but you still have people. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is a free agent. Rajon Rondo is a free agent. Dwight Howard, Markieff Morris. You have a lot of guys that are free agents. And to me, I think that this offseason can be huge. They're saying Rajon Rondo could leave. KCP could leave now that teams and the Lakers see what he can do, especially in the finals and the playoffs. But even Rajon Rondo, even though he's 34 years old, teams know that he still can have some vet experience and just some talent to add on to the team, like exactly for the Lakers. But I think that this team has a chance to win the finals if they do the right moves.
Yeah, this as much as I hate the Lakers, you got to give it to them. They do one thing really well, and that is sign free agents and make key trades at the right moments. And that Anthony Davis trade, as much as we thought it was maybe a little bit too much, giving up Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, it was not too much. And it was the perfect trade because Anthony Davis wanted to play with LeBron. And obviously, this season was a tremendous success for them, and it only elevated LeBron's status. But we'll get to that the GOAT topic later, maybe. But anyways, the Lakers I would suggest that they need to get a bench scorer or maybe even a reliable point guard so that LeBron doesn't always have to be the point guard. Maybe someone like Derrick Rose or I don't know, it's Chris Paul. I mean, someone else that can handle the ball besides LeBron. And maybe they bring back Rondo. I mean, we saw how much of a crucial piece Rondo was in that championship run. I mean, it just depends what the Lakers do. Obviously, KD, Kyrie, you have the Warriors come back. They need to make some sort of move to elevate themselves even more if they want to win another championship. And I think they will do that because they're really good at making key trades and signing key free agents.
Well, I am a LeBron fan. I've been a fan of him since I started watching and playing basketball. And him winning the championship with the Lakers is just crazy for me because they were in such a big drought, and who thought LeBron was going to come to LA and get them a championship after, it was Kobe's years, Kobe and Shaq, Kareem and Magic. Anyways, the Lakers have managed to build a team with players that put their ego aside. I think that's what differentiates the Lakers and the Clippers because like Shaq said, I think it was a couple of days ago, he said, between Paul George and Kawhi, one of them is the man and one of them thinks he's the man. Like talking about Paul George, how he thinks he's the man, obviously. But the Lakers have two guys who are the man. AD and LeBron are those guys that could be the best player on the floor at any given moment. I think you're a fool if you think that the Lakers aren't one of the top 2 or 3 teams that are favorites to land a superstar in the 2021 free agency class. I think it's them in Miami. I don't think any other team has the type of attraction to other teams because who doesn't want to play in LA or Miami, right? And, well, there's one player I think I know who didn't want to play on the Lakers, and that's Paul George. He didn't like the spotlight because he chokes a lot, but that's besides the point. I think the Lakers will make some moves this offseason. I think they're going to repeat. That's because I trust LeBron enough that he's going to come back and he's going to stay healthy and he's going to play how he usually plays without any drop-off. If they can get someone like Dion Waiters in 2017 when he was good on Miami, like a boosted version of Dion Waiters, like a guard that can handle the ball himself. He has good handles. He can pass. He can shoot. He can score. If they can get someone like that, maybe that's Drew Holiday. Maybe that's Bradley Beal. I don't know how they're going to trade for either of them. But Derrick Rose also, because they denied a trade for him at the trade deadline. I think the Lakers will repeat, and I think even if they don't repeat, I think they're going to be top 3 team 100% going into next season and 2021 free agency class as well.
So yeah, I agree with the point that they're going to be a top 3 contender. The only reason I don't see them as a contender in the free agency class is because they're going to have to clear a lot of cap space in order to sign a superstar. But I don't think they need one since they already won a championship with just LeBron and AD. I just think they need to improve their depth. If I'm not mistaken, I think Rondo has a player option. I think he's going to decline to get more money. KCP, Avery Bradley, JaVale McGee, Anthony Davis all have player options, and then they have Dwight Howard, Markieff Morris, Dion Waiters, and Jared Dudley. A lot of people are saying trade for Chris Paul. I don't think they should trade for Chris Paul because they would have to financially give up half their roster in order to get Chris Paul. That would basically leave them with 0 bench. I think their bench is a big piece as to why they won the championship. Guys like Caruso, Rondo, KCP, their depth on any given night, someone other than LeBron and AD was going to produce, and that's where their depth came into play. And I think they should just continue to invest in their depth because I think they have enough star power. They have a great coach, they're certainly going to be in the running to repeat next year.
I mean, obviously they're the champions, so I mean, But anyways, moving on to the next team, we have the Memphis Grizzlies. This team clearly I thought this was probably going to be either the 14th or 15th best team in the West before the season started. But obviously, John Morant proved a lot of people wrong. This team ended up winning 34 games and getting into the play-in tournament with the Blazers, and even had a big, they even had a lead in that game. They could have won that game, but obviously Damian Lillard took over and CJ McCollum. But this future is very bright. They have a lot of pieces. They have Justice Winslow, who I think can still develop, even though he's like 24. Dylan Brooks is a nice player. John Morant is probably going to be one of the better point guards in the league coming up very soon. Jaren Jackson Jr. is very underrated. Nobody really talks about him that much. He's a solid player, and I think he can be one of the better power forwards in our league. But the problem with this team is they really don't have a superstar yet. And that superstar could be John Morant coming up. But the problem with this team is they're still paying Dion Waiters. His dead cap is $12 million. They have almost $40 million in cap holds. So they really don't have any cap space either. So, I mean, this team's future is bright. They just need to develop their players a little bit more. And although they don't have a first-round pick, that's Boston's this year, this team is going to be contending in the West as well. I mean, we saw that last year. So, I mean, with John Morant, anything's possible.
I liked John Morant from the second he was a draft prospect in the NBA. I always thought he was going to be better than Zion. And I still do think he's going to be better than Zion. Even though that's hard for some people to hear, I think Zion's injury prone, and we'll talk about the Pelicans after. But John Morant is going to be one of the best point guards in this league. I think he'll be the best point guard in this league in a couple of years. The problem with the Grizzlies is that even though they have really good young players, they have Jaren Jackson, like you guys said. Dylan Brooks is also very good. Brandon Clark. And Jonas Valanciunas is also still pretty young, and he's still very good. They are injury prone. Jaren Jackson has been getting injured a lot. They couldn't really stay healthy. I think the Grizzlies got kind of snubbed from the 8th seed. I think had the bubble not happened, let's say this whole pandemic never happened, I think they would have been the 8th seed. But that's coulda, woulda. We don't really need to talk about that. But I think the Grizzlies can only rely on their future. I don't think they're a free agent hotspot at all. They need to go all in on Ja and building around Ja. Maybe they trade Jaren Jackson. I don't know if they want to, but if they can get a good trade for a good veteran, not a veteran, but get someone good to put beside Ja, maybe a good big man. Jonas is that. He could be a good big man. I think he averaged upwards of 15 points a game this season. But they need to go all in on building around Ja. I think that's their only option. So, yeah, that's what I think about the Memphis Grizzlies.
With the Grizzlies, I think they're already ahead of a lot of teams that are rebuilding just because they have that guy who's going to be your number one option come future time. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is a very underrated player. I think, as Tay just said, the only thing about them is that they need to decide who's going to be their wing player in the future. Justice Winslow is good. As a Heat fan, I watched him grow. He's kind of like a point forward at times. But the only thing about him is that he's very, very injury prone. Josh Jackson was a 4th overall pick, but he's looking to be a bust if he doesn't, rekindle his career somewhere. And then you have guys like Dylan Brooks as well. So I think they need to invest in a wing, whether it's through drafting this year or developing the ones that they have. I think, but yeah, I think they're already very much ahead of the curve because they have that superstar, or not superstar, but the future superstar in what they hope to be is John Morant.
I mean, this Grizzlies team is, to me, the team of the future. They legit only have 2 players over the age of 30, and I think that John Morant could be their next superstar. I would keep him untouchable. I doubt they would trade him for anything. Dylan Brooks, too, only 24 years old. Kyle Anderson, Grayson Allen, and just like Suhas, I also watched Justice Winslow play. He's a reliable player, but I would still trust John Morant with that final shot of the game. Jaren Jackson Jr. to me is underrated, and I'm going to be honest, I underrated him too. I don't really watch him play too much because to me the Grizzlies aren't too exciting unless John Morant is scoring the points. And I think I underestimate Jaren Jackson Jr., but this team is the team of the future. I think if they just keep the young players they have now, I think John Morant could be a stud, and this team could maybe make the playoffs next year.
All right, guys. So moving on to a team that doesn't have a bad team that isn't a regular second worst team in the league. The Minnesota Timberwolves are one of those teams that have young pieces that they can make trades for, that they can make trades with, and they have Cat and D'Lo, who are very good players. I think Karl-Anthony Towns in the regular season, before he got injured, he was averaging like 35 points a game. He was going crazy, and I think he's a top 3 center in the league, hands down, when healthy. And if he can stay healthy the whole season, then then the Timberwolves are going to be scary. And also with D'Angelo Russell, because he's a very, very good player. We saw in the Warriors when Curry was injured, he was very good. If they can make a trade for Devin Booker somehow, I'm not sure if it's possible. They won't get him in free agency because Devin Booker is locked up for many years. So I think the Timberwolves have a bright future. I don't think there's much to say about them. They just have to play their cards right like most teams. And I think they can make the playoffs next year if they do make a trade for Devin Booker or someone in that area, get the 3 best friends together. I think that's the way the Timberwolves should go.
Yeah. With the Timberwolves, I think this team has a very, very bright future. With Karl-Anthony Towns, D'Angelo Russell, they have the number 1 overall pick this year. So whether they draft or trade, I think reports came out that they're trying to look to trade for a wing, and I think that's a good move if they don't draft. I think their wing depth is a question mark for me, because I don't think Josh or Koji or whoever they have at the wing position is going to be that solidified starter for them in the future. I think they should trade for a defensive minded wing who can also score the ball. Maybe I think Drew Holiday would be a good option, but I think giving up the first pick for Drew Holiday might be a bit much. But someone that can play defense, because Karl-Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell are defensive liabilities. So I think if they trade that first overall pick, drafting a guy that is solid on defense and can also score the ball would be a very, very good option for them.
Yeah, this Timberwolves team.
All right, so moving on. Oh, never mind. My bad. Hudson, you go.
All right, that's fine. This Timberwolves team has the number 1 pick in the draft. Can obviously get them anybody. I do expect them to take Cole Anthony, or actually, I'm not sure, to be honest, but they do have D'Angelo Russell, who they traded for at the trade deadline, and Karl-Anthony Towns, so I think they're good at the center position with Cat. But D'Angelo Russell is a great pickup. I saw him play a couple of games with them, and he was pretty nice. But I still don't know who they're going to draft. I haven't done too much scouting on these college players as much as last year, at least. But hold up, sorry, I'm going to cut this part out. Cole Anthony, what? That's stupid.
That's funny.
I'm just gonna start over from the Timberwolves quickly. Yeah, this Timberwolves team obviously is the number 1 pick, can get anybody. I think to me, they're good at the center position with Karl-Anthony Towns. With point guard, they have D'Angelo Russell, who they got at the trade deadline. So I don't think their first priority is Cole Anthony or James Wiseman. But I do think that obviously the first overall pick can easily be traded to get anybody, but I think that they're going to use it, try to get somebody young. But that's really all I have to say about this team.
I'm gonna make one or two comments about this team because there really isn't that much to say about the Timberwolves. I think they have a really good center and they have a really good point guard. They really need wing depth, like Suhas said. I think if they really wanted to get the three amigos together, they would trade that number 2 pick to Phoenix. But we'll get to Phoenix later. I have another thing for them. But I'm pretty sure that I mean this team there's only one option they have to draft, and it's Anthony Edwards for that wing spot. And they just got to build up, young pieces. So I mean, we'll see what they do.
All right, so moving on to the next team, we have the New Orleans Pelicans. The Pelicans just came off of kind of mediocre season. They had Zion injured for most of the season, but they kind of tried to make a late playoff push, but I think it was too little, too late. They had lost a lot of ground. But with the Pelicans, I think Zion is a very, very good piece. I was very high on Zion coming out of college, and I'm still very high on Zion. When healthy, I think he's a stud. And I think Zion, Brandon Ingram, they have a very bright future. I think trading for a center like Miles Turner would be very good for them because I think that's the only spot that I'm kind of like iffy with. But Zion, BI, Lonzo, JJ Redick, Drew Holiday, maybe trade Drew Holiday for a center and some picks because he's kind of getting older. And yeah, I think this team is definitely going to be in the running for future contenders.
Yeah, I mean, to me, just like the Grizzlies, this team is a young team. Getting Zion, getting lucky with the draft lottery last year. Only played about 20 games, I'm pretty sure, last season, or 30. Not too sure, but if he stays healthy, he can definitely be a great player for them, a role player. Also got Brandon Ingram last offseason, Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart. You've veteran players like JJ Redick, who still has it, can still shoot the ball, get some points on the board. And another young guy, pretty sure they got him in the draft last year, Jackson Hayes. Derek Favors is another guy. I think that this team is, like I said, young team, definitely has potential. I do think they could make the playoffs next year if Zion stays healthy and he plays all season, and their new coach, Jeff Van Gundy, I think can improve Zion, as I've seen highlights of him helping him. I do think that this team can make the playoffs next year with their new head coach and new players, or not new players, but like I said, Zion staying healthy and this young team, I think that they'll make the playoffs next year.
I think, as you guys said, Pelicans are the team of the future. But I think going back on this season, I don't think it really was a success at all. I mean, yeah, you had BI be an all-star, but they babied, the hell out of Zion during the bubble. Like they babied him. They didn't allow him to play 20 minutes over, and that cost them a trip to the playoffs. So I mean, this team, it all depends on Zion being healthy. And one thing, if you're going to build a team around Zion, you have to have a stretch 5. They don't have a stretch 5. They have Derek Favors running the 5, and he really can't shoot the ball. So they really need to find a stretch 5 this offseason. And I don't, again, Miles Turner's name has been coming up a lot. And, that they could maybe trade Drew Holiday away. They have Josh Hart and all that stuff. But if you really want to build a team around Zion, you need to have 4 other perimeter players that can shoot the ball. And this team is built for the future, but they're really going to have to build around Zion or he's going to leave like Anthony Davis.
On paper, the New Orleans Pelicans have a really good team. Keeping in mind that Zion is supposed to be a superstar. He's going to end up being a superstar in most people's eyes. Drew Holiday, Brandon Ingram, Lonzo. I think the Pelicans need to trade Drew Holiday because he doesn't really fit their style of basketball anymore. And also, I think Brandon Ingram might walk because I don't know if he wants to stay in Zion's shadow. It's quite obvious that Brandon Ingram is better than Zion, but Zion is being treated like the king of New Orleans, although Brandon Ingram is the best player on the team. So I don't know if he's gonna walk or not. I don't know if it's a player option or not, but he's on like a $26 million contract. That's what I think it is. But I think another team will offer him a max, and I think if he wants to go to another team, he will, and they'll offer him a better contract, and he'll actually be appreciated the way he should be appreciated not how he's appreciated in New Orleans because of Zion.
Okay, so moving on to the next team, which is the Oklahoma City Thunder. Just came off, I thought, a very successful season. I think there was like this running post that I saw. It was like a 0.2% chance of making the playoffs or something, and they made it as a 5th seed, which in my eyes is a big success, as I said before. The big thing for them is what are they going to do with Chris Paul, because he doesn't fit the timeline of what they're trying to do. Gallinari is also a free agent, and I think he's gone. I don't think Gallinari is going to stay. So I think it's just a matter of fact of what they do with their vets. I think they should develop around Shea. I don't know if Shea's going to be that superstar, but I think Shea's a very good, could be a very good second option on a contending team. And just build for the future. Chris Paul, I think they should trade because like I said, he doesn't fit their timeline. Like making the playoffs is good, but I mean, I wasn't really confident of like them doing it like that much. So I think they should trade Chris Paul and or I think Gallinari's gone anyway, but I think trading Chris Paul for some young pieces would do wonders for them.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about the Thunder here, Chris Paul is the main priority. There's been tons of rumors that they could be trading him. And like you said, I don't think Gallinari is going to stay. I think he's going to head out. There's been rumors of him going to the Heat. I think he might go there. If he stays for the money, then I don't know about that. But if he goes on a cheap, maybe like 1-year deal, then that'll easily be able to take them. But I do think that the CP3, Steven Adams, and Dennis Schroeder duo can easily make the playoffs next season. And like Suha said, 0.2 chance to make the playoffs. And they proved everybody wrong, made the 5th seed, and ended up being the 5th seed, like I said, and going against the Rockets and taking them to 7, nearly beating them. Came down to the final shot that was unfortunately blocked by Harden. But this next season and off season is going to be pretty interesting for them.
I mean, this Thunder team really overachieved. And I really like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And he's really nice. Dennis Schroeder is a nice bench piece. Steven Adams has always been a rock solid center. And CP3, solid point guard and all-star. But they're gonna have to trade him this offseason. Their Gallinari's gone. I mean, they had a good season, but it's time to actually rebuild now and stock up more draft picks. They already have a lot of draft picks, but they got to stock up more draft picks. And they're going to be a team for the future once they get, they're going to hit on one of these picks. They're going to find a superstar in one of these picks. And it might be one of the Clippers picks. It might be one of the Heat picks. Maybe one of the Rockets picks. Just depends. But I think this team is going to be built for the future, but just not next season. We'll see how they rebuild that team, though. With a new head coach they still have yet to find. after letting Billy Donovan go.
For Oklahoma, I'm 100% sure Danilo Gallinari's leaving because he wouldn't post where to next on his Twitter if he wasn't planning to leave. It's kind of blatant that he wants to leave, and I don't think it's one of those type of things where he's leaving out of pity. I think he just wants to have a new journey in his career, and he wants to win, and he knows he can't do that in Oklahoma. Chris Paul needs to be traded, like Tejas said. They need to trade Chris Paul because he's old, and they need to start building young with Shane. They should start starting Schroeder, and they have like Darius. Basically, they have this team. Like Tejas said, they need a draft. Well, I don't think they're going to get any free agents, but they can trade Chris Paul for some young pieces. And people were saying they might want to trade Chris Paul to the Lakers, but I don't know what they would get in return from the Lakers because they don't have many young assets. But we'll see what happens with the Thunder in the future. Interesting team to watch.
So the next team up is the Phoenix Suns. This team's coming off of a great season. Now, I wouldn't say great, but a bubble was definitely the team of the bubble for me, going 8-0. Devin Booker was on fire, hitting game winners and having tons of great games. DeAndre Ayton was a huge factor for them last season. And now I know I've been on the Grizzlies. I know I said that this team was the best up-and-coming team. I was only focused on them. I was not thinking about any other teams because now I'm also looking at this team here. Also only 2 players, 30 and over. You have tons of young pieces here. Ty Jerome, Cam Johnson, Frank Kaminsky, Kelly Oubre, Elia Kobo, and Ricky Rubio they got last offseason. Dario Saric. There's tons of guys on this team, tons of young guys, and this team also has the number 10 pick in the draft, even after barely making the playoffs. I think that this team deserved to be in the playoffs instead of the Blazers. The Blazers did deserve to be there, but I think that the Suns also deserve to be there, and I think that I have high expectations for this team for next season.
I think the Suns team did a really good job in the bubble, and as you mentioned, they have a lot of young pieces. Devin Booker, obviously, DeAndre Ayton is going to be a stud. Kelly Oubre didn't even play in the bubble. Let's remember that. Kelly Oubre didn't play. Mikal Bridges was a defensive monster. Ricky Rubio was doing, making all the playmaking stuff. I'll say two key players I thought that played critical roles for them. Cameron Payne and Javon Carter played some big-time minutes for them down the stretch of these bubble games. And, Devin Booker is the key reason for them going, but also keep in mind they have one of the better coaches in the league, in Monty Williams. And this team is really nice. And I also have some high expectations for them. I don't know if they'll make the playoffs, but with Devin Booker, anything is possible. And I expect them to make some big changes or big moves to improve themselves over the offseason. But we'll see.
I think the Phoenix Suns are one of the hardest playing teams in the league, and they showed that in the bubble. They couldn't do anything else because when you go 8-0, when you go undefeated, basically they got robbed. I think they got robbed because what was the point of them going to the bubble if when they do the best they can possibly do, the best a team can possibly do, they still don't make it. I think the way the bubble worked in the seeding games was there was some problems with it, but that's something in the past. I think the Suns are going to make the playoffs next year, even with the team they have now. If they keep the same team, I think they can make the playoffs. But I don't think making the playoffs is their main goal. I think they want to win. I think they should try to focus on winning a championship in 5 years compared to just making the playoffs next year. Like, they need to focus more on actual accomplishments, not making the playoffs. I think DeAndre Ayton is going to be a superstar in this league. I think Devin Booker is already a superstar in this league. Ricky Rubio is a very good addition. They got him in the offseason, I believe. Kelly Oubre is very good, but I don't know if this team – I think they need one superstar. And that might sound like a little bit, but it's actually very hard to get a superstar in the NBA. But they need one superstar or one really good pick or draft very well. That they have the 10th pick, they can pick someone. Maybe Cole Anthony can drop there. I don't know if they want a point guard. That's the only player I know that's around that area of draft. But they need someone big on their team to take them to the next step. If not, I think they should explore trading Devin Booker and building around DeAndre Ayton as their main centerpiece.
Again, I don't know if they'll make the playoffs, but we'll see. Moving on to the next team, we have the Portland Trailblazers, who made a very nice comeback in the bubble games and made the play-in tournament and ended up making the playoffs, but losing to the Lakers in 5 games after somehow winning game 1. This team, obviously led by Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, they have a really nice center in Yusuf Nurkic. I think he's one of the most underrated centers in this league. They have some nice young pieces in this year, Little, Gary Trent Jr., and Anthony Simons and Zach Collins. But this team's wing position was the main reason why they lost to the Lakers. They really don't have anybody that can guard LeBron. Trevor Ariza was supposed to be that guy, but he actually opted out of the bubble. He's going to turn 36 when we start the NBA season next year. So I really don't know anything about that. Hassan Whiteside, they have his bird rights, but his cap figure is almost $40 million. Carmelo, I would love to see them bring back Carmelo. I thought Carmelo was a nice he played really well during the bubble games, and especially in the playoffs. I think Carmelo would be really nice. And they still do have $4 million in cap space. I don't know where they go with that. Rodney Hood is coming back after his Achilles injury, but we know what Achilles injuries do in this league. So this team can make the playoffs. They're going to be led by Damian Lillard has to go crazy next year, especially in a tough, loaded Western Conference. But we'll see what happens.
As someone who was rooting for the Lakers, the entire playoffs, I wasn't one of those people that were on the Blazers. I think they had a really good bubble seeding games. Sorry, they had a very good seeding. They played very well in the seeding games. When it got to the playoffs, there was a lot of people that overrated them and thought they could do a lot more than they could have actually done. There was a lot of people that thought they were an actual threat to the Lakers. And I think that's why Portland doesn't get the credit they actually deserve, because beating the Lakers, as we know now at this moment, because they won the championship, beating the Lakers was really hard to do. Jimmy Butler had to literally do all he could do in 2 games, drop 40 pieces. I think one of them was 35-ish, and the other one was 40. He had to give it all. He had to give all of his energy to just beat the Lakers in 1 game, and then he had to do it to the next game, and then he couldn't play the next game properly because he was so tired. So it really goes to show how hard it is to beat the Lakers, and the Portland Trailblazers got a game off them, and because of them winning game 1, they got so much. They got overrated so much that when they lost, people were disappointed in them, which isn't fair because they weren't supposed to beat the Lakers. On paper, they can't beat the Lakers. They don't have the talent to beat the Lakers. But Portland did really well. I think what they need to do now is build around Damian Lillard, and I think that requires getting rid of CJ. I don't think it's necessary to get rid of him, but I think if they want to go a different route and try to have a different style of basketball in Portland, they have to move on from CJ. And Hassan Whiteside's going to leave. As you said, Rodney Hood's coming off an injury that most players don't come back themselves. They don't come back themselves. So it's hard for Portland. I don't know if Damian Lillard's going to continue wanting to be an 8 seed or a 7 seed in a Western Conference. I think it's clutch time. I think it's Dame time now. It's all in Dame's hands what he wants to do. I don't know when he's a free agent, but Portland needs to get some stuff done.
Yeah, I mean, Damian Lillard deserves more to be a 7 or 8 seed every single season. Exactly about this last season, there's no way that the Blazers had a chance to beat the Lakers. Nobody saw it coming, and it never happened. So, I think exactly what you're saying, that the Blazers need to build around Dame, and that might require them to trade CJ. I think a guy that they could look out for is Zach LaVine. I don't know how the money's going to work out, but I think that having Dame at point guard, Zach LaVine at shooting guard, and then if I'm hoping, even though I'm not a Lakers fan, even though I'm not a Blazers fan at all, I'm just hoping for Melo to come back just so we get some playing time minutes as a role player. You can have Melo there. And then Nurkic, I agree, one of the most underrated centers in the league. Whiteside's probably going to leave, and obviously Rodney Hood's not going to be back to who he used to be in his at best. But I think I don't know if Damian Lillard can step up any more than he's doing now, but I think that they can use CJ for some type of asset, then that should be a good piece for them. They do have the 16th pick in the draft projected for RJ Hampton, who is a shooting guard / point guard, and I think that he could be a good fit for them, but I'm hoping for Dame at least. Like I said, not a Blazers fan, but I'm hoping for Dame at least that he gets some more respect. And by respect, I mean making it more than the 7 or 8 seed.
All right, so we're going to move on to probably the most bland team in the West. Sorry to the Kings fans, but it is the Sacramento Kings. They were, I think, the 9 seed. I'm just going to verify it right now. Sorry, not even close to the 9 seed. Sorry, they were the 12th seed with De'Aaron Fox, who is getting a lot of hype before this year. He is still a very good player. They also have Marvin Bagley, who I think is a very good player. But and Bogdanovic, who I think is going to leave, but still, he was good for them. But Sacramento, I don't really know what they can do at this point to be good now or in the future, unless De'Aaron Fox becomes a superstar, like a superstar who's in the MVP conversation. I don't think Sacramento is ever going to be a contender, or not ever, sorry, but like in the next half decade, I don't think they're going to be a contender. I think they just need to draft. They need to get really lucky with the draft. They do have, I believe, the 12th pick in the draft. If they can draft someone like a Tyler Hero, a diamond in the rough at the 12 to 14 spots have had historically some great players. I think Kobe was around there. Tyler Hero was around there. Giannis was around there. He might have been later. I'm not sure. Donovan Mitchell was around there. But if they can get someone like that to their team, maybe that can spark some fire in Sacramento. But other than that, I don't think there's much I can say about the Kings.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the most bland team in the West. De'Aaron Fox would have to extremely have a breakout season and just like prove everybody, literally become a superstar and just try to bring this team back to life. There's been so many trade rumors for Buddy Hield going to the Sixers, or I don't even know where anymore. Literally every team, they've come out a trade rumor for Buddy Hield for every single team. So at this point, I don't even know where he's gonna go. But I think that the next step for this team could be to rebuild. Bogdanovic is a great player for them, but I don't see how he's gonna stick with them. And to me, this is rebuild time for the Sacramento Kings.
I will say this. I just want to make this quick point. Before the season started, all the analysts were saying that the Buddy Hield extension that they gave him was really good, but everybody was talking how bad it was for they were comparing Jaylen Brown, and now that we look at him, Buddy Hield's a 6-man, and Jaylen Brown's a 20-point per game scorer, but that's not here or there. With this team, they're gonna have some cap space. They made a dumb mistake of signing Harrison Barnes back. He's not worth $23 million. They have nice pieces in De'Aaron Fox and Marvin Bagley, but they still have Kent Bazemore. The good thing is they have Kent Bazemore's expiring contract. They still have his bird rights, but his contract is almost $28 million. It's kind of crazy. But this team really needs to, get more young pieces, and quite honestly, just try and compete and probably tank. Honestly, they really need to find young pieces, to compete. Maybe the next half of the decade, but I really don't see anything out of this Kings team, to be honest.
Yeah, but next up is going to be the San Antonio Spurs. This team has some pieces, some pretty nice pieces on the team, but obviously not a playoff team. As we saw last year, they finished 10th in the West, and there was 4 teams all competing for the 8th seed. The Spurs ended up in the last of those 2, but they've obviously guys like DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge, who I think could DeMar DeRozan could I think leave or get traded, and LaMarcus Aldridge just hasn't been himself like he was on the Blazers or in his early years with the Spurs. But I don't really – I mean, this team hasn't been talked about too much, but they do have the 11th pick in the draft, so they could maybe use it as a trade piece with LaMarcus Aldridge or DeMar DeRozan. I'm not really sure about this team, but all I know is that obviously they have to make some moves if they at least want to be the 8th seed in next year or in any upcoming future.
I'll say, as long as this team has Greg Popovich, they will always be competing for a playoff spot. I know they're not that really good. DeMar DeRozan has a player option, and he wants to leave. He likes young pieces. DeJounte Murray's really nice. He's a good defender. Derek White is really nice. Lonnie Walker is really good as well. They still have Keldon Johnson, who I thought did really well in the bubble. Luka Samanik, who they drafted last year, he's not the Luka that we know, but he's still a young player and he can develop. Jakob Poeltl, I think, is probably I know he played in Toronto. I watched him a lot. He's actually a solid player. Bryn Forbes, but as long as they have Greg Popovich, they'll always be contending. But what the Spurs really need to do is, tank. I think they don't really have a direction with this team. They need to let their young players compete like they did in the bubble, and try and build themselves up for the future. Maybe hit on one of these draft picks and get another superstar like they did with Kawhi Leonard. But as long as they have Greg Popovich, they'll still always be competing.
For the Spurs, like you said with Greg Popovich, he likes to compete. But then you also said they should tank. I don't think Greg Popovich is the type of coach that tanks. He's one of the best coaches in the league. I don't think he's top 5 right now anymore because of what happened to the Spurs. I think I can name 5 coaches I would want above him right now. But I think he is a free agent. I know it's funny to call a coach a free agent, but I think he is a free agent sometime in the next couple of years. And he could leave if he wants to go to a young team and try to build up from that, because the Spurs dynasty is over after the 22 years of making the playoffs. Although a lot of those years were disappointing, they still did make the playoffs. I think DeMar DeRozan will leave. I know I saw a report that it said he will leave, and then he denied that claim, but I think he will leave. I don't think he wants to stay in San Antonio. We talked about DeRozan a little last episode with the Hawks and the Magic. LaMarcus Aldridge is 34, and he's old, and he's not good, and he's injured. I don't think they should keep him. DeJounte Murray's a young piece. If DeRozan decides to stay in San Antonio, I think they should trade. And he's only going to stay if he talks to the front office and they agree to build a proper team around him so they can actually compete, because he is a good player. I think they should explore trading those young players if they want to win now, or let DeRozan walk, or do a sign and trade, try to get something out of it. Like Tejas said, I don't think they have a direction at all. I think they're in a tough spot, and they don't have an exceptionally good GM, but they need to figure out something they can do. It's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough rebuild in San Antonio.
Yeah, again, as I said, the Spurs really don't have a direction. Anyways, moving on to our last team in the Western Conference, last but not least, we have the Utah Jazz. I really don't know what to think about the Jazz. I would say this team, I really don't know if they overachieved or even underachieved. This team, at the beginning of the season, like in October, so, they were supposed to be one of the, top 4 teams, like people contend after the Mike Conley trade. But, things really didn't work out. And in the bubble, they were really doing really well. And they even got up to a 3-1 lead. We saw the ascension of Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert as an all-star. But they blew the 3-1 lead, and they have a nice young they really have nice young pieces, and they'll always be contending. This team will still be they won't be a championship contender, but they will be a playoff contender in the Western Conference. And I expect them to make the playoffs. Again, they probably might want to get rid of Mike Conley's contract, but they're gonna get. They didn't even play the bubble without Bojan. So I mean, this team can be solid, but I really don't expect them to go too far in the playoffs.
For the Jazz, at the time of when they signed Mike Conley, I thought it was a really good pickup actually, but it was proven that they overpaid him. He could have made a shot, won them Game 7. It was a pretty open shot, but you can't really blame him. I think Utah, they just stick with Donovan Mitchell. I think they should explore trading Rudy Gobert because he might leave in 2021. But I think they should explore trading him now so they don't lose him for nothing. I think the downfall of Rudy Gobert is just going to start because the era of centers like Rudy Gobert, like classic NBA centers, is dying in the NBA, like the Drummonds and the Goberts. Like right now it's shooting, and I don't think Rudy Gobert is the type of guy who's going to develop shooting. He's not very athletic. He's not like AD. He's not like Jokic. He's not or Embiid, Cat. He's not one of those guys. He's a guy who blocks shots. Then he's also a good defender, great defender actually. Finished second in DPOI votes. I think he was second. I'm not sure. Definitely shouldn't have been second, but he still ended up second. He was, I think, the 2-time DPOY. I'm 100% sure he won last year, but I don't know if it's 2 or 1 time. But he's still a great defender. I think they stick with Donovan Mitchell, make sure he doesn't leave because he is, I think, a superstar in the making. Definitely really close to being a superstar if you don't consider him a superstar. He was dropping like 40 pieces and 50 pieces in that series. They have a pretty good team, but I think they can be better. And I think they do have a direction, unlike a lot of these teams. I think they're one of those teams that can be like Denver, that can win now, win later. But they just need to make the right trades and get the good shooters, get a good center on Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, I mean, with the Jazz, obviously their heartbreaking season came to an end. You were talking about Mike Conley. I mean, you can't blame him. There's I was gonna say many people watching the game. There was nobody in the stands, but they had those background noises, and he was under pressure. It was a deep shot and rimmed in and out. But like you said, Rudy Gobert is a free agent next season. I think it would be best if they trade him for something instead of nothing and just letting him go. But this team has the 23rd pick in the draft, which could easily get them somebody nice. Seeing Jimmy Butler obviously going 30th a couple of years back. Not a couple, but you know what I mean. Yeah, main thing here for the Jazz, to me, just keep Donovan Mitchell on the team. Like you said, superstar in the making. Keep him on the team, become a superstar in a few years, and that'll allow them to rebuild around him when he becomes a great player. And yeah, that's all for the Jazz for me.
I just want to make one last point. Rudy Gobert, he's going to be a free agent, I think, next year. The problem with Rudy Gobert is he's a defense player of the year, which means he's eligible for a supermax of $250 million. I don't think the Jazz want to pay him $250 million. They're not going to be the team to do that. And they, as you said, Darian, they're going to have to trade him. They're going to have to trade him. But anyways, thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Make sure you guys follow our socials on Instagram. Make sure to hit the subscribe button on YouTube and hit the like button. And we'll come back with another episode 3, coming soon. Thank you, guys.
Peace.